What to do when you have unfiled tax returns for prior tax years and you know that you owe taxes or you have a filing requirement. You want to make sure that you have all your 1099s, W-2s, which are the income that was earned for that year. For wage earners and independent contractors, if you don't have copies from those third-party sources or your employers, you want to request your account transcripts through the IRS using Form 4506-T, request for account transcript. There are instructions on the IRS website and the form is accessible on that site. That website is www.irs.gov, and you, on the search button, you put in Form 45-6-T, complete the form. You want to pay attention to lines number 6, which is the form number, number 8, which is the request for the 1099s, W-2s, and anything that was reported to the IRS by third parties or your employers, any company that provided you with funds. If you're a sole proprietor, that will be shown on those records. So you want to check the box on item number 8. Number 9 is the tax years that you need. And then the last thing you want to do is make sure you sign the form. The instructions indicate that you can fax the request in. Make sure you send it to the right fax number because there are several depending on the state where you are located. Follow the instructions. If you need assistance, give me a call at 323-344-2294, but it is not that difficult to complete the form. Fax it in and you should get the transcripts within 20 to 30 days at most. If you do not receive them, refax it after the 30 days, and if at the second request you do not receive it, I would go through the advocate and ask them for their assistance. And the way you do that is by submitting the Form 911. There is no excuse for you not filing a tax return just because you owe money. It is not in your best interest to delay filing a tax returns because you don't want the IRS or the state to implement the substitute for return procedures, which means that they will do a tax return on your behalf. But in the majority of cases, that tax return will result in more tax that will be due because no dependents, no credits are allowed for. They just take all the records that are submitted to them and they do a bill and they create a tax return for you. And again, if you are supposed to have some credits, dependents, your filing status will be single. For a company, it is, especially for payroll taxes, you want the correct amount of taxes to be reported on those employers' tax returns, the quarterlies. But there are processes and procedures where the IRS will do audits, and based on their computer audits, they base them on whatever was submitted to the agencies, and they just move forward. And that usually happens within the following year after a tax return has not been filed. If that hasn't happened to you yet, you still want to get those transcripts. I would suggest that you also check off one of the other options on that form. Let me check and make sure. You would want to request B on item number 6. On line 6, you also want to request B to make sure that there is no record of the IRS having done a substitute for return for you. And if they did, there's a different way that you have to file your original. Do not send it to Service Center. That's why it's important that you seek help from a professional because they can determine what is your best option. If you file an original tax return when there's already a substitute tax return that was filed, If you send it to Service Center, any adjustments will not be done on your behalf. It has to go to a specific unit. Again, seek help from your tax preparer, CPA, or a tax attorney so that they can confirm and verify that no substitute for return was done for those unfiled tax years. For self-employed people, sole proprietors, general partners, you want to base it on 1099s. Also ask for the account transcripts for all your W-2s, 1099s, or get them from your company. If, for example, a partnership should have issued you the K-1s, and again, they're going to show up at if your company filed them with the IRS, they're going to show up. If not, get that information from your partnership or corporation. So proprietors, get your bank statements. Partnerships also, all these entities have to have records where you can base your tax return on. If for example, your records were destroyed because of a fire or flooding and you don't have access to them anymore, they were destroyed, you're going to have to recreate them. Bank statements can easily be secured from the bank. Yes, it's going to cost you money, but you need to do them. You need to request them. Get your bank statements, invoices from third parties. Your accounts receivable sources must have copies of your invoices. Bank credit card receipts. In most cases, if you are under audit and the auditor asks for verification of your expenses, a credit card receipt is in itself not evidence that you paid for items to a company for business use of those items. For example, many people come to our office seeking audit representation, and the IRS is saying, okay, prove to us that you bought materials of this amount of money, or that you bought inventory for this amount of money, and all you have are your credit card statements. Well, that credit card statement might indicate Home Depot. But what did you buy at Home Depot? For which project? Or is the IRS going to say, well, how are you going to prove that this was for a certain project or not used for your personal use? So again, it gets complicated, and seek advice. Your tax professional will know how to guide you to get those records that have been destroyed, or you can also use a prior year's tax return if nothing else. If you go based on cash, the majority of cases you're supposed to be depositing the money into your bank account. If you're not doing that, how do you keep track of the cash that you receive? There must be receipts issued to a client. Again, if those were destroyed, go back to your client and clients for that year and ask for the copies of those receipts. There is no excuse, okay? You can come up with a different type of excuses, and I've heard them all over the 25 years that I worked for the IRS, and now as a tax representative, going on 11 years representing taxpayers, I have heard it all. Whether my dog ate it like when we were in school, my kids tore them up, they were shredded by mistake, you can always recreate them. In most cases, also keep in mind that people file the state tax returns first because in the majority of cases, that tax is less than the IRS tax debt. So they file a state tax return. You can ask the state for a copy of your tax return that was filed for the year that is missing at the federal level, and vice versa. You can ask the IRS for a tax return for an unfiled year that was filed with the state and use that same tax return information. You can use it for the other tax agency. So there's no excuse again. The prior year's tax returns, it's some people make it more difficult than what it should be. And the IRS, if you haven't filed your tax return, will start issuing you, by a certain time frame, they will start issuing you letters and notices. After maybe 3-4 notices, they will do a substitute for a return for you. And again, penalties and interest keep on accruing if you owe money. If you are due a refund, keep in mind that the statute for refunds is 3 years from the due date of the tax return. So 3 years from 4/15 of the year that you haven't filed is the time frame for getting a refund. If you go beyond the 3 years, the refund is not going to be issued because it's beyond the statute for refund. Okay, so keep that in mind. If you're expecting a refund and you haven't filed a tax return because you figure, well, I don't know money, so I'll keep a little savings there, you're basically giving the government your money to use however they want, instead of you using that money for your living expenses or something that you can use to maybe invest in something or buy something that you need, maybe another car, a down payment, or whatever the case may be. And again, if you owe taxes, that refund money can be used to offset the debt that you owe. And again, if it's beyond 3 years, in the majority of cases, they won't give you that credit. So it's important that you file all your tax returns. You don't want the IRS in your business auditing you under a substitute for return process and procedure, and then you filing a return after the fact, making adjustments and extending even the time frame for them to do an audit. Because remember, an audit can be done 3 years after the time frame that you filed the original return, and sometimes up to 6 years, depending on your filing status, whether you're a sole proprietor or not. Different things trigger an audit. So again, it is important that you file all your tax returns, especially if you're going to submit or try for an offer in compromise. The IRS will seek all unfiled tax returns even beyond the 6 years that most tax preparers will go back, as far back as 6 years. If you're submitting an offer, you will be required to file all your unfiled tax returns going back minimum 10 years. The state, depending on the state, they want them all. California wants all your tax returns going back even 20 years. Otherwise, they won't even consider an offer in compromise. So keep that in mind. And again, you can always recreate them using the other tax agency's information, or ask for the 1099s, W-2s from that agent that has, from the agency that is asking for the unfiled tax returns. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Tax and Business Zone, on YouTube, or on Facebook. You want to follow me on Tax Resolution Services Group. I post updates on there, articles, blogs, and other information that may be of interest to you. Also on our YouTube channel, there will be business videos that can help you with strategies to improve your business, such as how to price things, how to do a business turnover, things that can help you in improving or reaching your goals. Thank you again, and stay safe.